Hello, and welcome to the Weshtern Philosophy Podcast. Two friends with oceans of notions discussing the unseen forces in our lives through the lens of music, mystery, and crack. We have a Patreon at Weshtern Philosophy Pod. Don't forget the H. If you're enjoying the show and would like to see it grow, you can join this or make a once-off donation via Ko-fi.com. Both links are in the show notes below. In today's episode, we take a dip into the wild world of toxicity. So that's another aspect to toxicity, is not just what you prescribe, but the path the thing takes through your body and your own ability to take it. So like paracetamol, if somebody has like liver damage or something compared to somebody who doesn't, you know, the same dosage can have two different effects. Yeah. Like we talked about weight as well, that can be a big thing, age, other drugs, you know. I didn't realize until I said it there, but I think it does have a societal effect. Drugs have us so scared of going outside the therapeutic dosage into the toxic dosage. Because remember, we also have to hit the therapeutic dosage. You can't take too little of a drug either. So we have this tiny, narrow band that we're so scared of, because you combine a drug with the wrong drug, or you overdose or underdose a drug, and then it's the end of the world. It can have dire consequences. But the natural world's not like that.
I'm gonna probably be louder.
Could you go again? Oh my God.
All the dynamic range in your ears.
Right.
Yeah. Traumatized. Fucking traumatized.
Indeed.
La 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 la. This looks quite bouncy here. I don't know if that's...
No, I think you're okay.
That's fine.
The form. I have a limiter on you in the DAW, so...
That's what I need in life, a fucking limiter.
You need a fucking handbrake, Bart. A vocal and spiritual and conversational. Stop!
Will you stop?
No, Bart.
Yeah. Less of you, please. I've heard that a lot where people go, we might need a bit less of all of this. People do say that to me a lot.
That was great. Could we get it with a bit less Bart?
Yeah. You are a lot. I trigger people as well. Notice that too. Yeah.
Who's the last person you triggered and how? If you say me.
No, it wasn't you, no, and I don't think... Well, sure, we were all triggering people all the time, but I've noticed it a lot where people are just like, oh, that thing you're doing is really setting me off. And it makes me think, is that because I'm doing something wrong or something right, or both? Probably both.
Yeah. Are you in the therapeutic or the toxic dosage range, Bart?
I think mostly therapeutic, yeah. But when I was younger, it was definitely in the toxic range, because it would still be accompanied by some kind of... You know, when you're younger, you can be a bit more I never get that word out in English. Megalomaniacal. There's too many vowels in it. But where I would go, yes, I see you're having a response, but also I need to tell you what you now need to do to help yourself out. And that was so inappropriate, even though sometimes the observation was right and sometimes not. It was very inappropriate in relation, and I think then I was definitely in the toxicity range. Well, have I teed you enough? Have I teed you up enough, or do you want to bring the coffee into it?
We rarely do this. We tried to manufacture an intro there. We horrible. Were like, because something happened. We're like, we'll use that. That'll work really well in the theme and stuff like that. So we'll just turn the mics on, and then we'll do this little. Contrived kind of thing, and it wasn't that. It wasn't that. It was the because
coffee.
Then we just went completely off track.
Yeah, and then I couldn't speak anymore, and it was fine.
Yeah, and now we're in the episode.
Yeah, hello,
3 minutes
welcome.
into the episode.
Listen, it's all content, baby.
Well, the thing was, because I'm sure people are on tenterhooks, Bart, you were pouring a coffee for yourself, and you were like, I never offer you any, Anthony, and it's not out of rudeness. I just assume you dose yourself because you drink more coffee than I do.
Yeah, only like exponentially more coffee.
Well, you're a bigger man, so you know if we ramp up the dosage that way,
I think you're more measured anyway.
Yeah, maybe. I only have about a cup a day or even less, but today I'm having a bit of extra coffee, so I am dosing myself. And today is all about appropriate dosaging. And I love that it went into you triggering people as well. That wasn't planned at all. And that's that's way better. Yeah. That's way closer to it. Because, geez, this is the fastest we've ever gotten to a topic. But the topic
I'm a bit nervous. Like normally there's ramble chat. Can we just ram in some ramble chat? No.
Yeah, but we can go back down to the triggering because today's topic is toxicity. Dum. We should do a folk version of that System of a Down song.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. We can work on that. But I like what you were talking about there about when you were a teenager and you'd be like giving people the harsh medicine. In China, they say ni chiku. You eat the bitter stuff. You know, it's like
can you say that again.
Chiku.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah,
that's
to
interesting.
eat bitter. So like you can say. Ni hui cha kuma, are you able to eat bitter? And it means like, are you able to like do the hard stuff or hear the hard stuff that leads to self-improvement? Can you take your medicine kind of thing, you know? But there is a kind of person that revels in delivering the bitter. And I was absolutely that person, I'd say even into my 20s, where I'm just like, especially after a few pints, and I'm like, you know what you need? You know what's wrong with you? You know? And I was probably right more often than I was wrong, but it doesn't make what I was doing right.
Exactly. And that was exactly what I was feeling when I was just saying it. It's like it nearly sounds prideful to go, the observation was probably right. Yeah. But it was but a lot of time it was because a lot of my energy goes into observing things. And that's why, like, I'm always like, we're always talking about like, oh, I heard this happened to so-and-so, and what do you think about it? Because we're constantly like picking, why is that annoying or painful or interesting or funny or what's going on there? I got a response out of it. I think we both have that a bit. So quite often the observation will actually have gotten a lot of attention, but then, and for me it was definitely into my early 20s as well. Yeah. But it's like you have to, only later do you realize, but it's not about, it's about the relationship as well, and about things being in the right place. And that quite often, if people don't ask for it, you don't give it to them, you know, and that's what, it's also like that thing, I think we touched on it, or it might come out in the next episode, but where we're talking about that Dutch people always go like, well, I'm just being honest.
Yeah.
And it's like, that has nothing to do with it. You're just being rude. But it's like, no, well, I'm telling the truth, so it's fine. But it's like, no, actually, because no one asked for, like, if you, every day I come in, would go like, Bart, there's about 5 kilos too much on your stomach. I'd be like, but why do you tell me this every day? I know. It's true, but you don't. It's not necessary. You've brought me into a weird fucking headspace, you know. So
it's a bit the ends justify the means kind of thing.
Exactly, you know, which is rarely true.
No, I was watching an interview with Diego Luna and Javier Bardem. It's a lovely little interview on YouTube. God, the Latino men are much more caring and expressive.
Bardem is wonderful.
Yeah, he's
voice
something wonderful.
Yeah.
But oh God, just as a tangent, Alan Tudyk, who plays the big robot in Rogue One. You know, Rogue One was 10 years ago, the movie, and now Andor. It was 9 or 10 years ago, and then Andor season 2 just wrapped up, and he talked about like when he came back, you know, years later after Rogue One to play the same character again. Everybody has a trailer. Like where the actors have trailers where they go, and everyone gets a code name. So it's not the actor's name on the trailer in case there's paparazzi or it's a spoiler or something. So everyone gets a code name. And he's like, and my code name was Old Pal. And you're like, oh. And Diego Luna's there is like, yeah, mine was Carlos. It's like, what do we call the Mexican guy? What code name will we give him? How about fucking Carlos?
The question with that is like, were they slightly aware of it, which makes it funny, or were they not, which makes it slightly racist?
Yeah, it's very funny.
But no, I now have to go. I am a big fan of Puss in Boots, Antonio Banderas. So we're always doing that voice. I just love. We watched over Christmas. We watched The Last Wish is one of the Puss in Boots films.
Right.
Jeez, I just love the machismo and just and I saw an interview with him once. With him and Salma Hayek, I think, where you were talking about English being their second language. And she was just like, I think they kind of came into America around the same time or something.
Yeah, probably,
And she was just, and she was just like, oh, I was so insecure and whatever. And he was just like, I will be wonderful in this life. It's like, it's just wonderful when he plays that little fucking cat. And it actually suits the character because he's such a small little fucking cat. But then it's all this.
Yeah.
I will tell you and I will have my little glass of leche.
Well, he was Zorro, and it's like, he's Zorro and he's compressed. And to quote Terry Pratchett, like many things when they are compressed, they have a tendency to explode.
Yeah.
But actually, Bardem and Luna talk about this as well. And Bardem is like, in English, because he feels more detached from it, he can be wilder characters. He can be more villainous characters and stuff like that. But he's like, when he's acting in Spanish, he feels a bit closer to himself and a bit. Yeah. But anyway, they're talking about, God, this was the least interesting thing. But like, they're just talking about how kind of, they're actually talking about machismo and masculinity and how it can be, how it probably needs to be examined a little bit because some of it is not the healthiest. And Luna was talking about it. It's like, like we're actors and there's so much out there about the ends justify the means with making a movie. With like Werner Herzog and Fitzcarraldo, where like the actors were tortured and tormented and indigenous people were, treated not very well and put in dangerous situations. And the main actor is a literally schizophrenic abuser, you know. But there's a great movie at the end of it, and you're like, that's an interesting thing to question, like how much do the ends justify the means? How much suffering, again, Stanley Kubrick and Alfred Hitchcock, tormenting their actors and stuff to get great performances out of them.
And funnily enough, you see it a lot in the opposite way now, where like kind of people have really gone off. I was watching this or reading this thing about how people have really gone off girl boss movies. And I think it has actually a similar element because, like, I think it was the Critical Drinker was talking about that there was actually a few. There was the John Wick sequel with
ballerina Ana Darmas.
And he was like, "This is actually quite a good film." Like, it wasn't like it's brilliant. He was like, "It's quite a good film, and it doesn't have the message. It doesn't have the lecturing, but it is actually getting quite a bad response because people are so sick of those movies with the message."
Right.
And this one didn't have it, but it's suffering from that same thing because with those films that have the message, quite often like there will be a female hero doing like who can be quite nasty. But it's like, but that's worth it because we need to see this. And it's like, but it still isn't nice. And then he went into this comparison with Doctor Who, which I've only ever watched bits of, but that in the last season they've gone very, very messagey and very lectury, and but the Doctor stands over all sorts of like, oh, that bad person is now just going to rot in jail, or like, oh, they're going to be destroyed. And it's like, it used to be a lot more about compassion actually, where he's like, even in like the really old episodes where it's like he can kill the Daleks and he's like, but then I would be like them. And then it would be genocide. And here it's just like, no, because it's fine because that's a horrible, like I think in one of the episodes he says like the antagonist is just like a horrible white podcaster. And that's the worst kind of villain. And there's no compassion. And then you go, oh, that's interesting because you're talking a lot about compassion, but none of it is shown in that. So it's funny how there was that kind of Werner Herzog thing you were talking about before, and now on the other side of the spectrum, it's kind of done again, and people just get sick of it. I think people really, really tire of the whole breaking eggs to get somewhere kind of thing. Yeah,
I think the story is really important. I mean, like at the end of the day, Fitzcarraldo, it's a fucking great movie. Like, do you know that? Have you seen it?
No,
no. It's this mad story about a guy that I only barely remember it. He's like a merchant or something in Africa, and he has to take a shortcut to get his fucking cargo somewhere, and he gets all these natives to carry his boat over a mountain to do a shortcut around the river. And it's just this incredible act of like hubris and arrogance, but also shows what you can do with the force of will. And I suppose maybe it's a bit of a metaphor for movie making as well, because they went through hell to make that movie. And it's a great movie. Was it worth it? I don't know. But like, it's still being talked about. It's from, I don't know, late 60s, early 70s or something.
I think it's great, like a positive example of that kind of, like when you hear, there we go. Are you ready? We're going into Lord of the Rings territory. But we like when they shot the Helm's Deep battle. Apparently that was grueling, and it was just like night
4
shoots
months of night
in
shoots,
rain like machines, but then everyone is a willing participant. So it's grueling, but it looks fucking great, and that energy is in it. But everyone is a willing participant, whereas which is very different than having, I don't know, migrant workers do horrible things that they don't want to do. Like so, but so there is something to making a sacrifice to getting something that is actually probably a valuable thing. But it has to be willing and with consent by all parties, you know.
And I suppose it's just different. It's different in circumstances. It's different for different people and so on. Like we can take the extreme examples and go, that one went too far.
But then in the middle it's hard, because we were talking about with Ivan about like the Man on the Moon thing with Jim Carrey, where so that is a more interesting nuanced example where it's like he kind of made everyone sit through something quite uncomfortable, but I'm literally 50-50 if that was worth it. It was very interesting to watch. The documentary was even more interesting maybe than the film itself. And I'm kind of like, but that must have been shit for those people on set, but not horrible, but pretty uncomfortable. So in those situations, you're kind of like, meh.
And John Wick's a kind of an interesting one as well, because Keanu Reeves seems like a pretty switched on dude. And the John Wick character is kind of like the culmination of 25 years of Keanu Reeves being an action star and just building his skills and, you know, being able to do so much. And the director as well, Chad Stahelski, he was, do you know the story? He was Brandon Lee's double for The Crow.
Oh, no, I didn't know that.
So he was there when Brandon Lee was shot. So during the Crow, it was a prop gun, but they had a little explosive in it to make the muzzle flash. And there was a piece of metal in the barrel. And Brandon Lee was shot. He was hit in the heart, I think, and he died, you know. So I don't think they've ever like openly said, but there's, out of respect to Brandon Lee, but I think like a lot of that movie was Chad Stahelski, his stunt double, actually stood in for the scenes that Lee hadn't shot and stuff, you know. So in the John Wick films, all the muzzle flashes are added with CGI. They don't use any gunpowder on set because he saw what could happen, you know. So that's an interesting example of somebody compensating for, you know, like if you watch the original Crow, it's like a shoestring budget. It's like gonzo 90s kind of. It's a fun movie, but safety was obviously compromised. And now that there's people, out of that has come like a great series like John Wick. So which was safe, but then still great. Because often you kind of need, like we've all been oversaturated with CGI. And kind of just don't enjoy it. Like that is one of the reasons. Like there's a few more of why the Lord of the Rings are better than The Hobbit, is because it's much more CGI and it doesn't feel, in practical effects, do something where that gives us much more joy. But then you do need to sometimes bring in some danger. Now I would say, probably the gun thing was the right call. Maybe because that's keep our actors alive.
That's a very high level of danger. But you do see it with like you know, Tom Cruise and his stunts and stuff like that, where people are like, no, there's something going on.
And it's mostly himself he's putting in danger then. I just want to say one more thing. That's not my favorite use of CGI in John Wick. My favorite use of CGI in John Wick is in the third one. So Halle Berry plays a character who has 2 Alsatians, and like a lot of the fight scenes involve these Alsatians like mauling people, okay? But there were ethical concerns over raising and training dogs to kill, like to maul people, right? So they were like, how do we like get this result with the dogs without like ending up with 2 monstrous hounds at the end of it? So they made it a game. They made all the stuff with the stunt people and all the attacks and all that stuff. They made it a game that the dogs were playing. and they had to CGI out their wagging tails in the end of the movie.
That's so sweet. Oh, that's so lovely.
Yeah, so I love that.
Oh, that's really nice. And that's a great idea.
Yeah.
That's a great... So did they just not have tails, or did they have the tails?
No, they had
CGI'd?
tails, but they were like serious tails.
Yeah, serious tails. Barney knows what we're talking about. It's Blarney's 13th birthday today.
It's Barney's 13th birthday today. Happy birthday, friend. He's there. He's awake.
He's awake and he knows we're talking about... I had such a lovely cuddle session with him.
You did. You had a good romp with him.
First a romp and then a lovely... And he was just so calm. It was amazing. Oh, he's such a legend of a man. Hello, Blarney.
He's very good. He just loves people, that dog.
He's a yeah. We had a cat like that who was very human, who would watch telly with us.
Really?
Just so funny. He would just lay on the couch with us and just stare at the screen. I don't know what the fuck he thought was going on, but he's like, this is what we do.
Yeah,
and just, and then or her actually. We always called her he, but it was her and her sister actually just couldn't give a fuck. Like, no, that's not what we're doing. Yeah, but no, Blarney, 13 today, and a distinguished gentleman.
Yeah, it's funny. His we thought he would get more grey because obviously he has a grey muzzle.
Yeah,
but all that's happened is like his areas of grey have just turned to complete white. Like they haven't spread.
And he's still the big brown.
He's still the big brown, you know. He gets like random. He's got eyebrows as well. Like his eyebrows have whitened, which I think is why he's so expressive. Like having a dog with eyebrows is.
Also, he just makes use of like I think the tilt of the head is just so funny. Did you do that to me the other day? Were we talking about this? Did you sometimes just go?
I don't know. Maybe I'm picking up.
Yeah, learning from the master.
Yeah.
So we started off with a really quick topic, and then just. Like no, we need the tangenty start, and then we just went all tangent.
And we can loop back around now.
Well, but my distinguished friend, the doctor, had a theory about toxicity, which I quite like, and I've already quoted it in IRL, as the kids say.
IRL. What's it? Meat space.
God, yeah.
We got cyberspace and meat space.
God, I love a bit of meat space. Yeah. Would you expand on your
Was it about the
theory?
dosage thing? Yeah. So when I was studying my master's in science and herbal medicine, I remember like asking one of my teachers, and this is a speciality of his, I was like, what actually is toxicity? Like, is it a list of substances? Is it a list of effects in the body? Is it an inherent characteristic of a substance? Like obviously some chemicals are toxic, but then like, you know, some funguses are toxic and stuff. And I was just like, what is it? Can you point to anything and say that that's a toxic thing? Because even the most toxic of substances, like our body needs tiny amounts of cyanide. We'll die without it. Yeah. Obviously too much and we'll also die. So there's an old Latin phrase, Sola, dosis, facit, venenum, which means the dosage makes the poison.
Yeah.
So I don't think toxicity actually exists. I think toxicity is a description of when you do not respect dosage, the consequence of that is toxicity. So toxicity, I don't think, is an inherent attribute of anything.
It exists as a concept, but the concept is too much of a thing.
Yeah. So what it is what you actually need to talk about is dosage.
Yeah.
You know, because we have this in herbal medicine all the time where people are like, oh, that herb there, that's a bit dangerous. If you give somebody 30 times the dosage, they can have a bit of a bad time on that. So we'll ban the whole thing. You know, we have so much of this. Or St. John's wort, you know, because it can interact with medications, we ban the whole thing, you know. So yeah, when you talk about any kind of medicine, and actually this might be a relevant point. The reason people freak out about toxicity, because toxicity, we enter into a toxic space with pharmaceuticals very fucking quickly. Very fucking quickly. So if you are dosing somebody, there is a level of dosage where nothing happens. So basically you're giving somebody this drug, there's no effects, positive or negative. You have to hit a minimum threshold. It's called the minimum therapeutic dosage. And once you hit this threshold, you start to get some positive effects. Now, you might start to get some adverse events as well. And just as a asterisk, people often talk about side effects. Side effects are neutral. Viagra was a high blood pressure medication with the side effect of causing an erection. When these effects are negative, we call them adverse events. So people will often use the word side effects because it sounds a little bit like calmer, but actually when it's adverse events is the actual term. But anyway, so you hit the minimum therapeutic dosage. Now whatever drug you're taking is starting to have some therapeutic effects. But with pharmaceuticals, you very quickly move through the therapeutic range to the toxic range. So that's a very narrow band. So you got 3 bands: 1, inert, nothing happens; 2nd, therapeutic dosage; 3rd, toxic dosage. With pharmaceuticals, it's very narrow. So the difference between the therapeutic dosage and the toxic dosage of paracetamol is double, which is very small. You know, you can imagine taking 4 pills instead of 2. And I'm not saying that's going to send you straight into, it's more complicated than that, but like if you double something or triple it, which is actually quite easy to do with pills, you can start to get close to a toxic dosage. So we freak out about that with pharmaceuticals. The natural world doesn't really work like that. If you're working with herbal medicine, these inert to therapeutic to toxic dosages are much more gradual. So you'll start to get very, very mild therapeutic effects at a very, very low dosage. Those effects will increase and increase and increase. But to actually bring a herbal medicine into toxic dosage, it's very difficult. You have to take so much of it. Like even just the quantities. Herbal medicines are often measured in grams of dried herbs. Like, are you going to, like, think how much herbal tea you have to drink, you know? And even the herbs that I prescribe, like I prescribe in a very moderate range, but like I can triple it and still be in therapeutic dosage and not go into toxic dosage. So I think as a society, this has bled out because now we're afraid of toxicity the whole time. And I think it's partially a psychological layover because pharmaceuticals go into toxic range so much. Anyway.
That's very good. I like that, and we haven't had the professor on for a while, so I like that we got a bit of him. We can get a bit more of him.
Wheel him out and pull his string.
Well, I've been keeping him on a fairly tight leash recently, so I think it's good. No, that's very interesting, and it's always nice when we're doing one of these, and you really feel like, oh, that's a new thought, because we've talked about this before, and I like this concept a lot, especially when I remember, I think. Yeah, Louise was asking about it, I think, where she's like, oh, when is something giftig, poisonous, you know? Giftig.
Cool. Like
you have to get at the end as well, giftig.
Yeah.
But, Vincent van Gogh. But, so we were talking about it like that, but now now when you were talking, because I've heard this before, I was thinking about the societal part of that, and there is a tendency for oversimplification quite often anyway at a societal level. But I think that really applies to toxicity. Yeah, I think you're right, because it's even so interesting. We were talking about this the other day. We were talking about using a medicine where the tube in which it comes actually has like clear weight distribution. Where you would go, oh, okay, I weigh 60 kilos, and oh, Bart, you weigh kilos. And something god awful, 135 or something. But and you were like, isn't that mad that we don't do that with paracetamol, for instance?
Yeah.
So in that case, I suppose we're always lowballing it, or the dosages on the packaging.
Well, there's also like toxicity is specific to the person. Like if different people, so there's this thing starting to come into pharmaceuticals now, which is personalised medicine, which I've started to realise that different people respond differently to the same fucking drug. Can you imagine that, Bart? You know, pharmaceutical companies hate this idea. They just want everyone in the world on the same pill, you know. But
because it's a selling point.
But there's all these different factors that affect it. Even like the enzymes in our gut. If I remember correctly, paracetamol requires 2 enzymes to be metabolized into a therapeutically effective form. And if some people, now I could be wrong, I think it's paracetamol, don't quote me on this, but if somebody is deficient, if their gut microbiome is off, they might be lacking one of these enzymes, and it might not be able to metabolize paracetamol into a therapeutic form, you know. Then there's about the pathways it takes through the liver. So one of the reasons pharmaceutical medicine is much more toxic than herbal medicine. Let's say I prescribe somebody a formula with 5 herbs. Each of those herbs has, let's say, 20 different active compounds. Could be more. So I'm prescribing 100 different compounds simultaneously. A pharmacist will look at that and go, Jesus Christ, no, we don't know how they're interacting. We don't know how they're being metabolized. That we don't know how to research that. Literally, the way we research pharmaceuticals does not work for herbal medicine because it's just, I'm researching.
There's too many variables.
100 different compounds, all of which might be interacting with each other as well as interacting with the patient. So like, how can you do this? Well, we can do it because we evolved around these substances. We have thousands of years of knowledge of prescribing them. And we can do it because if I send 100 different compounds through your liver, they will be metabolized by loads of different metabolic pathways, right? So if you can imagine there's 5 people. So I said 5 herbs with 20 compounds. Imagine you're at Aldi, there's 5 checkouts open. There's 5 people, each with 20 items. And they all go through the 5 checkouts. No bother. What pharmaceuticals do is they prescribe an active pharmaceutical ingredient, one compound in incredibly high dosage that takes one metabolic pathway through the liver.
Yeah.
If that metabolic pathway is compromised, the liver cannot metabolize it into a healthy form, and we start to get toxicity. Either the liver gets overloaded and starts producing toxic compounds, or the compound itself.
The queue at Aldi is out the door.
It's one person, one teller with 100 substances. So that's another aspect to toxicity, is not just what you prescribe, but the path the thing takes through your body and your own ability to take it. So like paracetamol, if somebody has like liver damage or something compared to somebody who doesn't, the same dosage can have 2 different effects. Yeah. Like we talked about weight as well. That can be a big thing. Age, other drugs, And I do think... Sorry, I'll pause if you have anything to add.
No, I don't have anything to add. Go on.
But I think it is, and I didn't realize until I said it there, but I think it does have a societal effect where drugs have us so scared of going outside the therapeutic dosage into the toxic dosage. Because remember, we also have to hit the therapeutic dosage. You can't take too little of a drug either, So we have this tiny, narrow band that we're so scared of, because you combine a drug with the wrong drug, or you overdose or underdose a drug, and then it's the end of the world. It can have dire consequences. But the natural world's not like that.
No.
Even with herbal medicine, if you overdose on herbal medicine, if you take 10 times the dosage I prescribe to you, more than likely, you will either vomit or shit yourself. Like your body will just self-correct. It's like, whoa, too much, because like it's used to these compounds. Your body actually has processes for handling too much of plants. Yeah. It doesn't have processes for handling too much of a single substance being processed through one metabolic pathway in the liver. Yeah. So, and I'm wondering, does that have a psychological effect where they're just like, oh, no, we can't have any of that. That's toxic.
Yeah. Well, I think that is what it is, because obviously the most common usage of that phrase societally is toxic masculinity.
Yes, I was thinking of that.
And it is, and it's clearly, it might, I don't know if it stems from that, but it is being treated like, oh no, it's not a dosage issue, it's a poison.
Yes, it's poison.
And then what you see now is, I think, like, it's hard sometimes to know because people are in their own different spaces. And I do find that sometimes, like, one of the things I love about the community we live in is that you actually run into a lot of random people. So people will have their own little networks and they will listen to different things and read different newspapers and listen to different podcasts and whatever. Yeah. But sometimes I will talk, quite often people actually will be, because we're all geographically here, will be in a similar state of mind. But sometimes I will talk to someone and we'll go like, oh wow, you're on that one. I hadn't thought of that at all. That's still a thing or whatever, Yeah. But then you talk to them and then you go like, okay, we can. So I don't know how people listening will take this, but I do find that there has been a thing of like, oh, we don't like toxic masculinity. Let's get rid of all those traditional masculine traits. And then I'm finding that a lot of people, women, men, and everyone are like, yeah, can we have some of that back, please? Because, and not in the bad way, because I do think there was a toxicity in the way that we're talking about it. Yeah. But the solution was not neutering all the men or neutering the masculine in all the women. Yeah. It was like, no, we need to balance this, or we need to, because
process
now
it differently, or
because now you see a lot of people, especially who've been affected by that, and maybe I shouldn't say this, but I was in Galway, and I was at the university where I studied 14 years ago, when Blarney was born. and the vibe was very different, and I found it was so feminine. But all the men were also extremely feminine. And I'm not saying like that is necessarily a bad thing, but the men didn't look happy. Now, oh God, I'm gonna get so much trouble. I'm always the fucking scratching at the scab, but I do stand over that. Like, I'm not saying, because it isn't about the inherent thing. No. It isn't about, we're against the feminine, we're against mass. No, it's about the fucking balance. It's about like what we talked about with Niall here. It's about getting that balance right, things in its right place. It's about you and me going to people and giving them their tough medicine to take. Yeah. There might be some truth in that, but it wasn't the right balance, you know? Yeah, and it's always about, and I think we always come back to this, it's things in their right place. You might be onto something. That it was like, we need to just get rid of all the masculine. And it's like, no, we definitely, there's an issue, but we need to thoughtfully look at this. And I find I can hardly read a newspaper anymore these days because there's such a tendency to oversimplify. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know, it's us and them, it's left versus right. It's like, it hardly ever is. And quite often, what's that quote that I keep misquoting? It's something like, I have to look this up. Maybe you talk for a bit.
Yeah. Well, I think what you're talking, like the newspapers, I just see a lot of simple answers to complicated questions, which is comforting, but I don't think very, very useful. I'm happy to just hang out for a minute.
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah.
If I start talking, I'm going to start talking about dosage again.
No, but that was very nice. Tyranny is the deliberate removal of nuance. And that's one where I really agree with that. I think that when people go, no, it's just this. It never is. You could just no, it's not. No, it really isn't. Even if it seems so cut and dry. I had a conversation with a friend recently, which was like, but that thing, you will agree, is just that. I'm like, no, obviously not, because you can look at this, that, and the other. Like, and it frustrates people because they're like, can I not just have this in a small box?
Yeah.
But it's like, no, you can't.
Yeah.
But I think that dosage analogy is just very good.
I remember in secondary school, there was a fairly annoying fella. He was just like that friend in the friend group that was just a bit of a plague, you know? Just always winding
a bit
people.
of a plague is one of the most Irish things you have ever said. Like a small bit of the worst thing that has ever been.
Apt, actually. Yeah. But I remember one of my friends described it as being toxic even in very small dosages. And I was like,
cyanide of
you know. And there was probably still a context in which his like aggression and like fucking weaseliness or whatever could be like really beneficial or something. But in the friend group, he was toxic even in very, very small dosages. But I appreciated that it implied that there was maybe a tiny dosage where he was okay. The toxic masculinity thing, I just find it really interesting. It's like, it's toxic. It's hateful. It's negative. Any contact with it will kill you. We need to get rid of it. Whereas in actual fact, we know that the body responds quite well to stresses. You know, that you can actually like small dosages of toxic products can like, you know, can strengthen our immune response, and they can, you know, like, sure, that's what, you know, like even vaccines, like what are we doing there? Like we're introducing a toxin. We're literally introducing it, and they have all these, because it's the pharmaceutical. And by the way, I'm not anti-pharmaceuticals. I think pharmaceuticals have their place. I just think they're too broadly applied, and I think there are alternatives. But like we hear that the viruses are inert, or that, you know, all these different things. Like they have all these like lovely phrases, an interesting use of language to make us like very happy about the jab and to make the jab sound really beneficial. But like it is introducing a toxin into your body, or it is introducing a virus into your body, or it is introducing something negative into your body that will have a beneficial result. Like, it's toxic, but due to the processing of it, it has a benefit. And I think we've lost that nuance a little bit as well, because I think even things like toxic masculinity, I think if somebody presents as the toxic masculine, which does exist, of course, masculinity can be out of balance, and it can be incredibly harmful, and it can be particularly incredibly harmful to vulnerable people, to women and children and so on. Absolutely, we see that all the time. But in a certain dosage, coming into contact with that, learning how to deal with it, learning how to challenge it, probably strengthen maybe people a little bit. Whereas like just learning how, I'm kind of drawing from my own response here as a little guy who was often like pushed around and bullied and stuff like that. And I'm not saying everyone's experience is my experience, but I'm like, there was an aspect of that gave me a sense of self-worth, that drove me down paths and led me into self-developments where if it would just been like, oh, those toxic bullies, they're awful, hide them away. But I'm like, they don't go away. They just get taller, you will always encounter people like this in your life. And part of me is quite glad that I encountered them early and learned how to deal with them in my own way. And you might say I'm privileged to have had the opportunity to do that. But like, I don't know.
Oh God, you hit on so many toxic triggers for me there.
Good. I'm toxic. Am I toxic even in low doses?
No, this is all therapeutic, I'd say. But firstly, about the vaccine analogy, there's a really good mini series about John Adams with Paul Giamatti,
right?
Which is great. I watched it in my student gaff in Galway with the fire on, which really added, like in midwinter and just the open fire, and it really added to being in the kind of that world. But there's a thing where I don't know what they are vaccinating against, but it's obviously like they have some really primal kind of form where he makes the decision, or his wife makes the decision to go, right, there's a real plague of something, smallpox, or I don't know what it is, and they're finding a way. I think they're getting some
Was
cloth.
it rabies? Or no, he wasn't the rabies guy, was he?
I don't know what it was, but it was some kind of, I think it might have been measles or some. There's something that's going to be really bad if they get it.
Yeah.
And then they find some way to inoculate themselves with a tiny bit of it. And it works out.
Yeah.
But it's really tense.
Oh yeah.
It's like fucking touch and go. They're like, all right, we're going to try it this way. Yeah. And hopefully you're all going to get a little sick, but not too sick. And they do. They all get quite sick, and they get high fevers, and then they're okay. Mm-hmm. But there's something real about that. And I 100% agree with you that we, especially because of the consumerism in the pharma world, they try to take that out. It's like, no, it's great.
This is safe,
it's shiny,
and this is dangerous.
That's safe, and that's it. And it's absolute bollocks. And then in terms of the masculinity thing, what you were saying there about martial arts, or you weren't saying about martial arts, but that's kind of what you're saying. Like, isn't it better to be strong than safe? Because you're never going to be safe. And I think there's a couple of bigger themes that you're touching on with what you said, where I'm like, firstly, lack of nuance. So we just touched on that one. But then there is that idea of like making, like sterilizing the world or something. I mean, like sterilizing as in using rubbing alcohol to make them, or whatever. You know, it's like, no, it's never going to happen. Or it's like, let's push all the bad men away. No, you can't. No. Like you know what you get is Andrew Tate.
Yeah.
Who I think is awful.
You get superbugs. Andrew Tate is the MRSA of the internet.
I think he's so awful.
He is antibiotic resistant.
But then what I got even more upset than at him was when RTE, the Irish national broadcaster, were like, what's going on with all these weird lads who love Andrew Tate, and he says horrible things, and aren't they all silly? And that just makes me really angry.
Yeah.
Because we're talking about young men who, in general, haven't done anything wrong, and they're making a certain move, and instead of going, hey, how can we provide for this more intelligently? You just go, that's very bad now.
Yeah.
Get rid of that. And that upsets me because I'm like, it doesn't work. And this is probably a trigger for me as well, as being like, oh, be the good boy, be very adjusted, be assertive. Yeah. Like, obviously, and don't be aggressive. That's fine. But it also then goes into don't be assertive,
Yeah.
And it's not right. It isn't right. We need people who are brave enough to stand for their convictions and just removing it. But you can never remove things. Even if you would murder all of the very masculine or the aggressively masculine men, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
And that's so that's another. Yeah.
Well, if what you're reminding me there is like Dettol kills 99.9% of bacteria,
Yeah.
So we had this great discovery of bacteria being pathogens that are causative factors of illness. And the great thing about bacteria is that you can see them. They exist. You can see them under a microscope. You can identify them and you can prescribe an antibiotic that kills them. And you're like, brilliant. But bacteria don't cause illness. Like, we are constantly surrounded by bacteria. We are constantly exposed to bacteria. We are arguably made of more bacteria than cells. We have more like bacteria in our gut than we have cells in our body. It is not exposure to bacteria that causes illness. Illness is caused by the interaction between the exposure to the bacterium and the body's immune response to it. And that is where illness occurs. And it is like this therapeutic toxic dosage thing where it's like exposure to something in a range where you can, within the therapeutic range, where you have an appropriate ability to respond to it, to process it, is good. It is good for you. It stresses your body and it, you will come out of it stronger.
Yeah.
If you do not have the ability to process it, or if its dosage is too high, it will make you incredibly ill, might kill you. And we live in this world now where, and like we know it, that everything's too sterile, and our kids' immune systems in the developed world are disastrously, underdeveloped and prone to coughs and colds and so on. And there's I don't think there's any one factor to that, but I think definitely the overall sterility of the world we live in.
Yeah.
And I do think there's a bit of that happening psychically as well. And this is not me being like Spartan style, like throw them up on a cold mountainside and the tough ones will carry through. I think, so to go back to vaccination, like a lot of people, like, I don't know if people realize this, but Chinese medicine fucking invented vaccination.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Variolation, the Qing dynasty, 16th century, kids would be exposed to infectious illnesses. But the exposure was only part of it. There are also protocols for prescribing Chinese herbal medicine after exposure, after deliberate exposure to these pathogens. And they are different. So if you got a pathogen at our time of life, we use certain herbs to like really bring the fever down really quickly and so on. Antipyretics, I guess you could call them in biomedical terms. But when you're exposing a kid to variolation, you actually do something we call venting heat, which is you actually support the immune response. You actually want them to have you're not just trying to pacify everything, you actually want them to have a really strong immune response. But you're also supporting them. You're not just suppressing, but you're supporting them through a strong immune response. So the variolation, their version of vaccination, is two parts. It's the exposure, but it's also supporting the child through the response, And I think we maybe lost that. We have this bacteria-focused thing where it's like, if we could just control all the bacteria, everything will be fine. Yeah. But we're starting to find it doesn't work like that.
No, and life, like I was thinking about these big themes that I see above us. and one of them is just like, I believe life, for a large part, is discomfort. Like, whoever thinks that you can walk through this shit comfortably, that's a weird fucking experience.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know about you. Well, I kind of do know about you. But I mean, like, for me anyway, all the time, I'm running up against something where I'm like, fuck, that's painful. Okay, time to grow, you know?
Yeah.
It's kind of like, and it's like that thing with when you have kids and you go, it is why it's so easy to manipulate people when it comes to kids, because we're so safety minded, and we get them from the tiniest babies, and you're like, you need to provide all that safety because they're helpless. But then gradually you need to remove that safety so that they can grow. But it's like, I don't know who said this, but I heard someone saying also, like, part of you would want to put them in armor and in a cellar, but they wouldn't be lovely anymore. Like, the loveliness is part of the vulnerability, is part of the loveliness. And Jesus Christ, it terrifies the hell out of me.
I'm sure.
I'm terrified because I love them so much. But I know they need to be exposed. And these notions of, no, we can just go without that, do away with that. That's not nice. Let's take it out. Even like with the vaccine thing, instead of having traditional vaccines where it's like, we're going to give you a bit of an illness and your immune system is going to grow, in the pandemic, they tried to just go, no, we'll go without all that. We'll just do gene therapy. That'll be great. Well, if your eyes are open, you can see what the results are of that, and that disgusts me. But like, it's this notion of that life isn't discomfort. Like, that is kind of what's underlying it. There's a few things that keep coming back. It's also that very material instead of relational idea. I feel like Chinese medicine is much more relational. And there's that material idea of like, no, it's just stuff.
Yeah,
no,
it's just bacterium, and we have an antibiotic to kill the bacteria. Whereas, like, even if you look at the variolation, like the three parts are there. There's the exposure to the bacterium or to the pathogen, but there's also the immune response of the patient. We're managing both of those. We are Chinese medicine always views the person in relation to their environment, whereas scientific materialism is reductionist. So it's like, we have a bacterium. When you expose somebody to that, it causes illness. How do we kill the bacterium? The relation is gone. You know, and so, and it
allows for the removal of. I'm getting myself into all sorts of trouble, but it's fine. It also allows for the removal of just kind of practical thinking. Like, there's, I don't know what you would call this in English, but in Dutch we would say like boerenverstand, with like farmers' wits.
Yeah, farmers' wisdom or common sense.
Just like common sense, I suppose. Where you're just like, there was this whole. Anyway, okay, we're in it now. The cancellation is coming. Yeah. But like, there was this whole thing where there was a certain kind of antiviral drug during the pandemic that was produced by a huge pharmaceutical company. And they seemed to have a lot of good results, but they weren't sure because it was a new disease and they hadn't tried it out. But they had used that particular antiviral drug for years and years and years and years. It was out of patent and been administered to, I think, 5 billion people with so little side effects that they got a Nobel Prize for it's the safest drug. It's so effective against all these viral diseases. It's saving a lot of farmers in Africa their sight. They would lose their sight to river blindness, and they didn't anymore. And then people were like, it might be good for this. And then the common sense response would be, well, we know it's safe, or it's as safe as a pharmaceutical can kind of be, because it's still doing, like you say, the one track and all that. Yeah. But we know it's acceptably safe by all our standards. We just don't know if it's effective. That's 100% reasonable. But then, because of that very narrow-minded thinking, the story wasn't that. The story was like, we don't know if it's safe to use with this. Like, no, we know it's safe. We just don't know if it's effective. And that's one of those ones where you go, you've shown your hand to me. You've shown me that your intention is very difficult or very different than what you're saying. And it just, the common sense goes out the window. Yeah. It's like, no, we know it's safe. No, you don't know it's safe with this. You don't know if it's safe with this. No, you're changing effective and safe. And anyway, sorry if everyone's puking into their cups by my...
I know it's very funny. Like, there was a bit about, obviously when the virus, which must not be named, hit China, they started using Chinese medicine against it, and to varying degrees of efficacy, but definitely some efficacy. And there was like these really like panicky news headlines going, there is no evidence that Chinese medicine treats this disease. And you're like, it's a new disease. There's no evidence anything fucking treats it. Like, calm down. And, you know, it's interesting. Going back to the common sense thing,
Yeah.
there was a formula developed by the Taiwanese government, which you're both very familiar with, Qingguan Yihao.
It works so well, man.
Yeah.
It works so well.
NRICM 101. It was developed for mild to moderate strains of the virus, which must not be named. But because Taiwan had such a low incidence of the virus, they struggled to get a cohort together, right? Because they were just so good. They were so, because they'd had SARS in 2007, I think, roughly. So they were really experienced with this type of illness and how it would spread. So they were really on top of things. Anyway, they did something called a bedside to bench study, which basically means they were like, we don't have enough patients for like a huge pharmaceutical trial, N1000, nonsense, which is another gatekeeping thing.
Of course it is.
You need big numbers to trial anything, so only massive corporations can
even if you can
evidence.
Manipulate those numbers.
But anyway, so what they did was a bedside to bench study. They found people that were already sick, they treated them with this formula, and they found they improved. And then what they did was they brought it to the bench, to the lab, and tried to figure out why it was so effective. And they've been doing that for the last 3 or 4 years now. And they're finding out loads of things in relation to like spike protein and TMPRSS expression and like all the same language that we hear about from the pharmaceutical side being done on the herbal side. But rather than starting in a lab and bringing it out into the field, they started in the field and then reverse engineered, not even reverse engineered it. It makes more sense to me to do things that way, because the thing about laboratory conditions, and I think this comes into like nuance and this idea of the perfect world and the things we do and do not want in our world. When you develop anything in a lab, the more perfect the laboratory conditions are, the less relationship it has with the outside world.
Yeah.
So the better your lab, the more artificial it is. The more you are controlling for variables, confounding variables, as they call them, the less it is mirroring real life.
Yeah.
You know? And then we start to see this when you take something out of the lab and into real life and you're like, oh, actually it has this adverse event and this adverse event. And we didn't realize it would interact like this with this, because, and instead of working on that side, that messy relational side of things, we're like, no, we need better and better labs, Yeah. And I think that's an interesting mindset as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I had some thoughts and then I derailed myself with different thoughts, which is always a great thing to do. Mm-hmm. But no, I agree. I agree with all that.
Yeah.
And it's just like an immune response. You will always, like, every action has a reaction, and that old adage, But that's just the way it is, and you can see it with both now in the people having so little trust anymore in pharma and in scientific institutions because they've been fucked over so royally. And
which is also a bit sad, because there's a tremendous role to be played. I really don't want anyone to think I'm anti-pharma or
nor am I.
anti-research.
It saved my life and my kid's life, and it's something we have that's great, but I just want to have access to loads of stuff and not just the one till at Aldi. I shouldn't drag out that metaphor into another. It. But and it's the same, I think, with the toxic masculinity thing, where you now, because the way there was, like, the observation was probably correct, like there's an imbalance here, but then the way it was dealt with was so poor that now you probably, well, I wouldn't say that you have more of it, but you definitely have areas where it's much stronger, I would say, and where people are like, oh, you're not going to be nuanced? Okay, well, then I'm not going to be nuanced either. And that's obviously a poor response. Like, you shouldn't be as bad as your adversary. You should actually try to create a world in which it's good for your adversary as well.
Yeah.
But that's not how everyone works. And it's like that thing I was saying about the Critical Drinker and the Girl Boss movies. It was funny, like, he showed, like, all these action movies with female leads that were like amazing.
Fucking Alien, Terminator, like
The Long Kiss Goodnight was one that I found so. I don't know why, there was something really exciting but a bit terrifying about that one. I probably watched when I was way too small. But like there's so many, but it was, I think, and then this is where the lack of nuance comes in again, because it's like, oh, you just guys can't deal with a strong feminine lead. Well, it didn't appear to be an issue in the 90s, but you're actually lecturing to us. And that's the thing we don't like. We don't like people lecturing us like Bart and Anthony did when they were 21. So we were guilty of this, you know. But it's like, which is probably why it's so frustrating, because we know how bad it is, because we've been.
Hopefully, we're approaching the therapeutic dosage.
Yeah, but age. But isn't it though? Like so often, I will be so upset at something, and then I'll go, "Yeah, you did that." Yeah. One of the reasons you're so upset is because you made that mistake.
Hi,
and
it's
now
me, your shadow.
Oh, fuck. Yeah. Oh, it's horrible. It's kind
Why haven't you been returning my calls?
Yeah. Who was I talking to? I was talking to a close friend, and I was just like, this thing you're doing, it's really not. She's like, but you're doing that too. And I'm like, I know, that's why you really shouldn't be doing it. It's like, fuck, it got me. But it's... it's that kind of lack of nuance. Like that was like I saw that thing where all the Star Wars actors of the last trilogy, which was in large part piss poor storytelling, and then people are like, oh, you're just all white bigoted nerds, and it's like, really? Are you gonna put out a shit thing and then just accuse everyone of discrimination because you can't deal with the fact that it might have been shit and lectury?
Yeah.
Like, it's such a funny... But then, and we've talked about this before, I think, I can talk to anyone about any topic if there's space.
Yeah.
You can have a completely different opinion than me. Like, you can even have, like, a super abhorrent opinion. But if there's space and we can listen to each other, I will be able to do it. Whereas if you're like, no, it's this, it's that. I have a good friend of mine who's like... he's in his late 80s, and I might have talked about him before. We met while I was working in the pub in Holland, and he would just always come at me with the most right-wing shit ever, because he's like, here's this lefty political science student, and we would just, but it would be so much fun because he would just, I could see already, like at the beginning I was a bit like, fuck is going on? Yeah. But then quite quickly I was like, oh no, he's testing me, and he's hopping balls, and he loves just sitting down, and he would be like a bit too loud, and he would be like, well, obviously it's just like this, isn't it, Bart, isn't it? Don't you think it is? And it was great. It was, and he's a lovely, kind-hearted man, and I just had to figure out, that's what. So and that's another way in which, if you just we've seen a lot of that in society and in public discourse as well, where it's like, there was that ridiculous thing, for instance, where President Obama used the N-word in an example, and people started giving out to him, and you're like,
sorry.
Okay, dear listeners, I think I can leave that one with you. Like, it's so stupid. But it's when you remove the relational aspect.
Yeah, but that's like blaming the bacterium for the illness. The word is not the problem. The association, the usage of the word, what the word represents, the people that historically use the word, they're the fucking problem. The word is like the smallest part of that.
Yeah, exactly. And
if you can't see the difference between the depiction of the word and all that it represents, like it actually shuts down conversation about it.
And what I was thinking yesterday about this, actually, which is a bit of a tangent, but I was in the centre in Corfin, and I saw, like, I think the Sun or one of these really tabloidy newspapers, and I caught a few of the headlines just while I was passing, because it's so in your face, and I was like, oh, funny. 15 years ago, that really was their thing. But now online, it's everywhere. So it's kind of like a lot of people I think would go, oh, geez, that tabloidy, shouty nonsense. But actually, that is what social media does to us, so many things. So it's, in a way, that has really been like secretly integrated, that rage porn kind of, and it just really dilutes the public conversation.
I have two notes here. One is
I saw it. I was counting.
Social dojo. That old right-wing lad that used to wind you up. I view that as being social dojo because it's a safe space. Yeah. He's not actually trying to radicalize you.
No.
He's probably harmless.
And he probably didn't even hold those views exactly himself.
Yeah.
You know.
But it's good for somebody that's a bit young and maybe a bit too certain.
Yeah, I was a bit too certain.
To test them and to like realize either, I need to bend a bit on this, or to be tested and go, no, actually, I am firm on this. I really believe it. How else do you know if you're not tested? Yeah. If you're in an echo chamber of all your mates saying, you're thinking all the right thoughts, you're making all the right actions, you're wearing all the right clothes. Yeah. You don't actually know until you get tested. Yeah. And when there are safe spaces, and interesting phrase. I just heard myself.
Yeah, you don't mean it in the.
But like having a chat with somebody in a pub, when they're coming at it with that kind of attitude, is pretty safe. It's fun to like talk to somebody that has really different views from you and just bounce balls off each other. I think it's really healthy, really useful, and I think really valuable. And I think when we do find those spaces, it's really good to play in them. And to keep it as light as you can and stuff. We talked during the Teenagehood episode about wearing like band t-shirts and like, fucking old lads in the street would whine me, cut your fucking hair, stuff. That's great, man. Like they were being a bit hostile, but it was teaching you how to handle it and stuff. Yeah. And I think it's really
it's
good.
Again, that thing of there is discomfort and you need to face discomfort. Like, and what I was saying about like, we're going all over the shop, but I think it's all in a web of connection. But like the stuff with my kids, like I was so worried when I got kids and they were going to school. I was like, oh God, I know my personality and I know part of my shadow. And I'm so afraid that if kids would be mean to them, I would so overreact. Yeah. And I would step in and go, hey, you 5-year-olds, go away out of that. And I was really worried about that. But thank God, they actually, and I think this is for me one of the main reasons, like I think there's a lot of amazing people doing homeschooling, but first of all, I couldn't do it. I just don't have the temperament for it, I don't think. That sounds like a bit of a cop-out, but I think it's true. But I would be afraid they would miss those inoculations, social inoculations, Like now, like we were recently at a communion and someone was giving Louise a hard time and I was like, you okay? And she's like, yeah. And I just heard him go, hey, dude, stop that. I'm not enjoying it or whatever, And I was just like, yeah. And she's been like that for a couple of years now where I'm like, no, sound, actually, thank God you've got this. And thank God because I know myself well enough to know that I am likely to step in too soon and I would rob you of that learning opportunity. And then the thing you were saying about safe space is so interesting. I could see it happening there. I've had this a lot recently as well, where I've used words that actually I think are very positive words, but have had their meaning corrupted. Like words like diversity or compassion or safe spaces, because the way you understand a safe space, I also like a safe space like that. I think that's a great thing. I think we between us have a safe space like that. Oh yeah, dear listener, it was a really funny thing last Friday where we were playing a session and I was shite. I was tired and I was sad and I was absolutely, I will come on here. This is not good for the brand of West Ireland music. Please book me for all your music events. I was dog shit and I wasn't on it. And I knew I wasn't on it. And I just I think I even said it during the session. I was like, I cannot be arsed to be better today. And I got a lovely message from Anthony and it did not offend me even 1%. So you delivered it beautifully, where he went, I so appreciate how rock solid you normally are. So if you are looking to book me, 99.9% of the time I am. It's true. I am Dettel. But it's just killing everything. Slaying the room. No, but oh God, the metaphors are getting out of control. Yeah. But it was so good because you were just like, I really appreciate how good you normally are. Because you weren't, and I could see that you were making a decision not to be because you were actually choosing to conserve your energy. Yeah, and it was very kind. But it's the thing you can only say when you have that safe space between each other, where you look like we know we're out looking out for each other's well-being. So I know you're not saying that to go, you're a bit shit and my ego wants to triumph over you.
Yeah, because honestly, I never wanted to say, yeah, that was fucking terrible, you need to do better, because it wouldn't have been true.
Yeah.
And there was a part of me that wanted to say, no, Bart, you were great. And I was like, no, you weren't. You
weren't great. No.
But it just highlighted how great you are 99% of the time, you know? And for me, that's what a safe space is. That's why I call it a social dojo. For me, a safe space is like, and again, this is my own background and stuff, but I'm just like, if the world is hostile, I want a place where I can play with hostility.
Yeah.
And I mean play. And like dojos, martial arts places, they're beautiful places to play. Everybody is, but you are playing with hostility, you know?
Yeah.
And like that's what that means to me, is a safe space is where you can safely engage with challenge, not where challenge is completely removed.
Exactly. And that is the corruption. That was where I was going. That is then the corruption of the term. Mm-hmm. It's like, no, for it to be safe, it needs to be completely sterile. Yeah. And there's not, and it's such a silly thing. You see it especially in universities and stuff, where they talk about all these safe spaces and trigger warnings. And it's a bit like, this is not my idea. Who was that guy who wrote that, The Coddling of the American Mind? Well, you can find it.
Yeah.
But he said like they kind of treat it as a church. It's nearly because religion is so removed from us. It's now like, no, we cannot have the bad speaker on our campus because our campus is like a church. Whereas when I went to university, which is not that long ago, the campus is where you are challenged with strange ideas. I remember like one of the first things we did in political science when I was like a newbie 18-year-old doing my first year of political science. And they were like, so the benefits of monarchy, the benefits of fascism, the benefits of communism, the benefits of democracy, the downsides of democracy. And I was so excited by this. I was like, oh yes, this is how we can look at things. We don't just go, that's the bad one. We go, so why do we prefer this one? Or do we prefer this one? Or do we think, and it's like, monarchy is great. If you have a good ruler, it's great. If you have a shit one, oh my God, it's going to be bad.
That's a big if.
Clearly, but it's good to understand those mechanisms. Whereas if you're like, no, we're not talking about it. And you see this a lot, I think, currently with communism, where people haven't examined it and don't go, this is the upside, this is the downside. It's just like, no, it's great. And you see it in like, I saw it in the clip of The Last of Us, where they're literally just going, communism is great. Mm-hmm. And you're like, I'd love a bit more nuance on that one, you know. But
it also, like, thinking that way allows you to, like, if you're in a democratic society, and you're looking at the benefits of monarchy and the benefits of fascism and the downsides of democracy, that doesn't mean you're going to change. That doesn't mean you're going to flip to another one, but it means like, oh shit, they do this better than we do it. Like, I think whatever the dominant paradigm is the thing that should be challenged the strongest.
Exactly.
Not the thing that deserves to be protected.
Yeah.
You know, and then if it's healthy, it'll survive.
Yeah, it's a bit like there's a line in a U2 song. I don't even know which one it is, and I don't think it's a particularly good song, but they sing something like bonus and something like, stop helping God across the road like a little old lady. And I was like, yeah, if you believe in God, for instance, do you really think the omnipotent creator needs all that protection? You know, it's like, he made you, and he made the guy who's insulting him, so it's probably fine, isn't it? Like, that kind of, it shows a lack of confidence in a way.
Yeah.
And like, I think, things are robust enough to deal with stuff, and we have to put that, like kids, especially as we grow older in a society, you have a more parental role towards more people, I think, the older you get, or that's the way I think it kind of should be. And we should give them the trust. That sounds a bit like I'm above them. I don't mean it like that, but more like, just give people the trust that they can withstand adversity and grow from it. And it's the thing that if you want me to be just sobbing in a heap on the couch, the thing that will do it most often is to see how beautiful people are and how strong they can be in horrible circumstance. Like sometimes you see people and they've just had nothing but shit thrown at them, and they will still be righteous, and not righteous in the fucking, in the fake horrible plastic sense of the word. they will still be kind and compassionate and not in the corrupted sense of the word.
Yeah.
And it breaks my heart because it's like, oh, you've had all these reasons, you've had all these opportunities handed to you to go, I'm a victim, or I'm now gonna push back against this horrible thing that has happened to me. And if you're then still choosing to be good and kind, then you're amazing.
Yeah. I think the other thing that comes in there, though,
I was
is
like undercutting well done.
No, but I just think, I agree with all that. But I also think that like when people do come up against things that they can't handle, it's really important we have their back as well.
That exactly a
it's
bit like you said about the ventilation, where you're like supporting the child.
Yeah.
And giving the difficult response.
Absolutely. It's not like, because people do come up against things that are too much. They do come up against illnesses
100%.
that can kill them. They come up against psychic assaults and social pressures and all
100%.
these different things that can destroy them, you know. So it's not just like toughen them up, but it is like, again, it's those social dojos. It's those like when we can play in those places and we can maybe raise our capacity for dealing with these things, but nobody has unlimited capacity. All of us have a breaking point. None of us are an island. All of us have something that we might come up against that will destroy us, where the only thing we can hope will get us through it will be the people around us that might have a different capacity or a greater capacity. So I think that's really important as well, you know, not just like, fucking stop whinging, you know.
Yeah, but I don't think that's what I...
No, I'm just saying...
I said, no, but you're adding beautifully because it's not... I 100% agree to that, like... We need, the dojo is a good example because there is that thing of play. Yeah. And play is like a thing that you can repeat and where, you're being challenged, but also you're looked after. And that's why, like, that's inherent in the thing of the safe space. Like, if you would have gone like, hey, Bart, you were just shit and left it at that, if there would be no care, then I would have been hurt. Yeah. But it's because of your care that I can take the harsh medicine of like, that was quite bad. It is funny though. It was, but it's also a thing about being witnessed. Like it's a beautiful thing with close friends that you can witness each other. Like that you witnessed me doing something that I never do because I could have easily pushed some energy out of that tank and gone, no, now it'll be fine. Yeah. It mightn't have been great, but it would have been fine. But I was like, no, I'm actually going to conserve that energy and be a bit bad. Yeah. And you were like, hey, that's not normal for you. Nice one. Yeah. I congratulate you. And that's a beautiful holding that's there in friendships. And that's transformative. So it's never without the relational aspect. It's not like pull yourself up by your bootstraps. That's not what I'm about at all.
It's the therapeutic dosage.
Yeah, it's the therapeutic.
It's not inert and it's not toxic.
Is that...
he's just dropped it on the doorstep. Postman's here.
Thank you.
I think we're okay. I think he's heading away.
Yeah.
I have my second note.
Oh, you looked at me in a very challenging kind of way. Am I going to take some bitter medicine?
No, not at all. You brought up Star Wars, and I remember one of the things about, I think it was specifically was it The Rise of Skywalker, the most recent
that was the
new trilogy?
The most horrible one as well.
It was just
because
nothing.
The second one I was okay.
I'm a Last Jedi apologist. Yeah. I think it has
me too
problems.
A little bit. There's nice bits.
I think it's a very good movie. I don't know if it's a great Star Wars movie, but I think it's a very good movie.
Yeah.
But anyway, we won't get into that. Jesus, that has set the internet more on fire than anything we did.
Yeah.
No, the third one in particular, there was like Rey, the main female character. They were complaining about her being a Mary Sue. When Mary Sue is somebody that's just good at everything for no reason, you know? Yeah. And,
I didn't know that. Okay.
And she was, you know, but I'm like, I think that's a bit of a fairly misogynistic thing because there's so many like pieces of media where there's a man that's just naturally good at everything and we don't have a word for that. But my problem with the third movie in particular was Rey being good at everything left nothing for anyone else to do. Like she was the best fighter and the most intelligent and the best pilot and the best, you know, all these things. So, you know, and she was just great at everything. And you're just like, that's just not compelling because that also doesn't bring her into a relationship with any other characters because she's not depending on them. She's not really learning or changing because she's just brilliant at everything straight away. And I think people missed the point of the original Star Wars trilogy where... in fairness to Luke, our hero, quote unquote, he does blow up the first Death Star, but he fails at everything else. Everything else. he fails at. He fails to rescue his friends. He loses to Vader. He fails to complete his training with Yoda. You know, he fails to confront the Emperor. He fails to beat Vader again. He loses constantly.
Yeah.
And he's still super compelling. And then the hero of Star Wars, the one that defeats Vader, is the fucking Darth Vader, who we first see murdering a bunch of innocent people, who tortures Princess Leia, who engages in these horrible crimes in this terrifying 7-foot-tall black suit, is the one that defeats the Emperor at the end of Return of the Jedi and actually, you know, brings about the good. It wasn't Luke. They failed. They failed throughout the whole second and third movies. They accomplished nothing.
And he grows, but he does grow. I do think that thing with the things being misogynist, I never know how I stand on that, because I think sometimes that's important to go, that is the backdrop of this. Mm-hmm. But then also I do think it's just right that it's not compelling to have a character that can already do everything and has very little growth. Like, I do think it happens in other films where there's a male hero, but I think those are also not very compelling. Yeah. It's a bit like maybe fucking Taken or something, where he's just an expert fucking killing machine. But then everyone's like, yeah, but those are very thin stories. Like, you can watch one of them and it's kind of good crack, but then after that, you're the second one, like, nah, I'm done. But I do think like growth is endlessly captivating for us. Mm-hmm. Like, we know it as people who do certain things, like play music or podcast even, like the thing where you can endlessly get better. And I definitely have a lot of endless to go on a lot of these things, but it's very compelling. So it's compelling to see it in other people as well. And if it's just like, all powerful, all fucking, then it's good.
Yeah. Okay. But also, the hero of Star Wars is the worst dude in Star Wars.
Yeah, and it's interesting that from the beginning they go, this is the one who's going to bring balance. Yeah. And that is very true, that balance is often brought by horrible destruction. I'm not saying, and that's not me saying, so we should go for that, but it's like, quite often it is, you know, like if the moment where a lot more people are equal is just after the revolution, when everything's on fire or something, you know, so, Mary, I didn't know that Mary Sue was the term for that. I've learned something new. I've heard that word, but I never knew what it meant. But that's someone who can do everything.
It's a woman.
It's a woman who can do everything.
Yeah.
Okay, and it is interesting that it probably isn't. Because
there
isn't the male equivalent of it.
I don't think there is a male equivalent.
So that is, and that then, okay. So I take your point. That is
because John Wick's kind of that. Like, John Wick just
oh
my god, it escalates throughout the film.
But his dog.
Like, the first one's like relatively, you know, okay, that's a kind of a small, tight story, and like he's a pretty capable dude. I can see that. And then by the fourth one, you're like, Jesus fucking Christ.
Funny how stories really suffer from when they're expanded hugely. There's a small, tight story being, well, The Hobbit being the prime example, but a tight story being told well is so much more compelling than something being watered.
I will say something though, and I think it's something that people might miss. You know, John Wick and The Matrix and all of these come out of, like, influenced strongly by the Hong Kong action movies. Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan, John Woo, Yuen Woo-ping, you know, all this stuff. And I think people like watch those movies and they're thin because they're just action scenes linked together by pretty flimsy story. But I think the really great ones, and I am thinking about like John Wick 4 in this, you know, where people are like, oh, the story's gone completely off the rails and stuff. I'm like, for me, the story is, the bits in between the fights are just visual noise. I just want them to be interesting. I want them to be engaging. I want them to be visually interesting and stuff. And I'm like, make me a cool world, that's fine. For me, the story happens in the fights. I think people miss that. I think we're so conditioned to think story only happens during like long pauses and close-ups and dialogue and things like that. But like, you can tell stories through combat. And I think Jackie Chan is the master of that. And then I think, Yuen Woo-ping was the master of that. That's like The Matrix. The character development in The Matrix mostly happens through the fight scenes.
That's true.
Not through dialogue or reactivity or so on. So I think that's one thing people, just a little bugbear of mine. And I think if you open yourself up to the character development and the story unfolding through the physical action, I think these stories have a lot more depth than you might think.
Yeah, and it's important in what kind of context you put a story.
Yeah.
I remember going to see the last James Bond with Pierce Brosnan.
Oh yeah.
And I think because I was still quite young, I think the ones before that I was kind of like, okay, so it was just more like, oh, okay, I'm just going to watch an interesting thing about a spy. And then I think the second to the last one, I think I realized like, oh, this is quite silly, a lot of it. But then I really enjoyed the last one, which I don't think did well at all because it was so silly. But I was like, yeah, it's going to be really silly. Yeah. And then that made it fun. Yeah. You know, it's that kind of, so it's nearly like with you with the fight scenes where you're like, yeah, I'm not looking for fucking Kafka or anything. Yeah, I'm looking for just that. Yeah. And if that's done well. But sometimes they set themselves up incorrectly then as well. Like if you take yourself very seriously, it sometimes can become harder to take you seriously.
Yes.
Which is a bit like with people. Like if you have the guy down the pub who's just, yes, I'm going to talk to you about this thing I'm aware of. And you're, yeah.
Are we that guy down the pub, Bart, or?
I don't know, because we're mostly doing it to each other, I suppose. It's fine.
We're raising each other's like capacity for the dosage.
Yeah. But also the is it like Well Actually in Dungeons and Daddies, the Well Actually character who's just like constantly telling you, well, actually, it's different. And anyway, just super annoying guy. But
that's one last point. I do think that is interesting that like as people, we can raise our capacity for each other. You can raise the dosage for things. Like I think we have like a great capacity for highfalutin chat with each other and a great enjoyment out of it. And like I do sometimes like run into somebody and just be like, dial it down, Anthony. They didn't ask for this. You know? Yeah,
for me it's probably going straight to emotional depth. Mm-hmm. Like for you, it's probably the professorial side, and for me, it's just going like, well, what's in your heart today? Yeah. But then it really helps if you can make light of yourself a bit as well. And I do love that, and I do love it when, actually, I think Katie's very good at this. She can level me with a comment, just completely deflate me, and I do kind of enjoy that as well. It's like, it hurts, but it's correct. It's the right dosage. it's like it's against the upper limit, but it's the right dosage.
Unreal. This has been Weshtern Philosophy. Follow us on all the socials at Weshtern Philosophy Pod. If you want to support the podcast, you can join our Patreon to help the show grow, or make a one-off donation via the Ko-fi link in the episode description. We'll be back next week with more chats and another topic. Slán.